At 71, Margaret Ellis received a birthday card from her son that contained no birthday wishes. Inside was a printed brochure. A nursing home. She stared at it for several seconds before looking up at her son. Daniel. What is this? Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Mom, please don't make this difficult. Margaret picked up the brochure again. The cover showed an elderly woman smiling beside a flower garden. Underneath were the words, "A new place to call home." Margaret looked at her son. "I already have a home." Daniel sighed. "We've talked about this." "No," Margaret said calmly. "You've talked about this." Daniel glanced toward his wife, Rachel. Rachel was sitting on the sofa, avoiding Margaret's eyes. Margaret noticed. "You've been discussing this together." Daniel didn't answer. "How long?" "Mom, how long?" he finally said. "A few months." Margaret slowly put the brochure down. "A few months. We were trying to find the right place." "You were trying to find a place for me." "Yes." "Without telling me." "We didn't want to upset you." Margaret gave a small laugh. "You didn't want to upset me, so you planned my future behind my back?" Daniel rubbed his forehead. "That's not fair, isn't it? You live alone. I've lived alone for 6 years. You fell in the kitchen. I slipped. You could have broken your hip. But I didn't. You could have." Margaret looked at him. "So because something could happen, you've decided I shouldn't live my own life?" Daniel's voice softened. "I'm worried about you." "I know. Then please understand." "I understand that you're afraid." Daniel looked surprised. Margaret continued. "But you're afraid of the wrong thing." "What does that mean?" "You're afraid something might happen to me." She pointed toward the brochure. "I'm afraid nothing will happen to me." Daniel stared at her. Margaret picked up the brochure. "You see this place as safety." She tapped the picture. "I see it as a waiting room." Rachel finally spoke. "Margaret, that's not fair. The facility is beautiful." Margaret looked at her. "Have you been there?" Rachel hesitated. "Yes." "When?" "Last week." Margaret nodded slowly. "So you've already toured it." Rachel looked down. Margaret turned toward Daniel. "And you paid the deposit?" Daniel didn't answer. Her silence told her everything. "You already paid?" "We wanted everything ready." Margaret felt a strange ache in her chest. Not anger. Something deeper. She had raised Daniel. She remembered holding him when he was a baby. She remembered walking him to school. She remembered working 2 jobs after his father died. She remembered sitting at the kitchen table late at night, calculating whether she could afford his university books. She remembered telling him that he could become anything he wanted. And now her son was telling her where she would spend the rest of her life. "Daniel," she said quietly. "Yes." "Do you really think I can't take care of myself?" He looked away. "I think you shouldn't be alone." "That wasn't my question." He didn't answer. Margaret stood and walked toward the window. Outside, autumn leaves were blowing across the street. Her house was small, nothing luxurious. But every room contained a memory. The kitchen table where Daniel had done his homework. The hallway where she had measured his height every birthday. The living room where her husband had once played guitar. The garden where Daniel had buried his first pet. This wasn't just a house. It was her life. And her son had decided she had outgrown it. "Mom," Daniel said softly. She turned. "I know you're angry." "I'm not angry." "You are." "No." She smiled sadly. "I'm hurt." Daniel's expression changed. Margaret continued. "There's a difference." Rachel looked uncomfortable. "We only want you to be safe." "I know. We love you." "I know that too." "Then why are you making this so hard?" Margaret stared at her. "Because you're asking me to give up my independence before I need to." Nobody spoke. Daniel looked at the floor. "You're getting older." Margaret smiled. "Yes." She walked back to the table. "I've noticed. You can't pretend you're still 40. "I don't." "Then what are you trying to prove?" "Nothing." She looked at him. "That's what you don't understand. I don't want to prove I'm young. I don't want to prove I'm strong. I don't want to prove I don't need anyone." She took a breath. "I simply want the right to decide what happens to me." Daniel sat silently. Margaret picked up the brochure again. "What's the date?" "For what?" "When did you plan to move me?" Daniel hesitated. "January." Margaret looked at the calendar. 3 months. They had already planned her life 3 months into the future. Without her. She folded the brochure carefully. "I'll consider it." Daniel's shoulders relaxed. "Thank you." Margaret smiled. "I didn't say yes." "I know. But I'll consider it." Daniel stood and hugged her. Margaret hugged him back. For a moment, she felt like everything was normal. Then Daniel whispered, "We're doing this because we love you." Margaret closed her eyes. I know. After they left, the house became silent. Margaret stood in the kitchen. She looked at the brochure. Then she opened a drawer. Inside was a small blue notebook. The cover was worn from years of use. She opened it. The first page contained a list. Places I want to see. She had written it when she was 56. Underneath were dozens of destinations. Italy, Greece, Egypt, India, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Brazil, South Africa, Thailand. She had crossed only one off. Canada. She had visited once with Daniel when he was young. She turned the page. There were handwritten notes beside each destination. See the pyramids. Walk through Rome. Watch sunrise over the ocean. Take a train through Switzerland. Eat real pasta in Italy. See the Great Barrier Reef. Margaret smiled. She had forgotten about the notebook. No, she hadn't forgotten. She had postponed it. Every year, something had happened. Daniel needed university tuition. Then he got married. Then he bought a house. Then the grandchildren arrived. Then there were medical bills. Then family emergencies. She had always said the same thing. Maybe next year. Now she looked at the nursing home brochure. January. Then she looked at her blue notebook. Her hands trembled slightly. She opened her banking app. For 15 years, Margaret had been quietly saving money. A little from every pension payment. A little from investments. A little from everything she could spare. She called it her freedom fund. She had never told Daniel about it. She had originally intended to use it for small vacations. But she had kept saving. And saving. And saving. She had never calculated exactly how much was there. Until now. She stared at the number. It was enough. Not just for one trip. For the trip. The kind of trip she had dreamed about when she was young. A world cruise. Margaret searched online. There it was. A ship that would spend more than 4 months traveling around the world. Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia, the Pacific, South America. The itinerary looked impossible. And beautiful. She leaned back in her chair. Then she laughed. For the first time that day, she laughed genuinely. Imagine that. She looked at the nursing home brochure. Then at the cruise itinerary. Her son had spent months choosing where she would live. She could spend an afternoon choosing where she would go. She picked up her phone. She called a travel agency. A cheerful woman answered. Good afternoon. How can I help you? Margaret smiled. I'd like to ask about a world cruise. A world cruise. Yes. Are you looking for next year? Margaret looked toward the window. No. She glanced at the nursing home brochure. As soon as possible. The agent laughed softly. That's quite an adventure. Margaret smiled. I think I've waited long enough. The agent asked for her preferred itinerary. Margaret opened her notebook. She read the list. Italy, Greece, Egypt, India, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Brazil. She gave the destinations one by one. When the agent told her the price, Margaret paused. It was a lot of money. But then she remembered something. Money had never been the reason she postponed her dreams. Fear had. Fear of being selfish. Fear of disappointing people. Fear of what others might think. Fear of needing money later. Fear of getting older. She had spent decades being responsible. Perhaps she could spend 1 year being brave. I'll take the suite, she said. The agent asked, would you like to add travel insurance? Margaret smiled. Yes. Anything else? Margaret looked at the notebook. No. Then she paused. Yes. What would you like? I'd like to add every excursion you have. The agent laughed. All of them. Margaret laughed too. Yes. When the call ended, Margaret sat quietly. She had just booked a world cruise. At 71. Alone. Without asking anyone's permission. She looked at the nursing home brochure one final time. Then she folded it. Not angrily. Carefully. She placed it inside a drawer. Maybe one day she would need a place like that. Maybe she wouldn't. But that decision would be hers. She opened her blue notebook and wrote one sentence beneath the list of destinations. I am not finished yet. Then she closed the notebook. For the first time in years, Margaret felt something she had almost forgotten. Anticipation. Not fear. Not guilt. Not obligation. Anticipation. She imagined waking up on a ship with nothing but ocean outside her window. She imagined walking through cities she had only seen in photographs. She imagined sitting at dinner with strangers. She imagined hearing languages she didn't understand. She imagined taking photographs that Daniel would someday see. And for the first time, she wasn't planning her life around what everyone else needed from her. She was planning it around what she wanted. 2 weeks later, Daniel came to visit. He noticed the house looked different. Mom. Yes. Why are your closets half empty? Margaret smiled. I'm packing. Daniel frowned. For the nursing home? No. He looked confused. For what? Margaret picked up her blue notebook. For the world. Daniel stared at her. What does that mean? Margaret smiled. It means your mother isn't moving into a nursing home. She paused. She is going on a world cruise. And for the first time, Daniel had absolutely no idea what to say. Daniel stared at her. What does that mean? Margaret smiled. It means your mother isn't moving into a nursing home. She paused. She is going on a world cruise. For several seconds, Daniel said nothing. Then he laughed. Not because he thought it was funny. Because he genuinely couldn't believe what he was hearing. Mom, you're serious? Completely. You booked it? Yes. For how long? About 4 months. Daniel's mouth fell open. For months. Margaret nodded. He walked toward the kitchen table and picked up the cruise itinerary. He read it once. Then again. Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia, South America. He looked at his mother. You're actually doing this. I am. But why? Margaret raised an eyebrow. You wanted me to move somewhere new. Daniel looked embarrassed. I didn't mean. I know. She took the brochure from his hand. You wanted me somewhere safe. Yes. And this is safe. Mom, it's a cruise ship. Exactly. What if something happens? Margaret smiled. Then there are doctors, nurses, staff, security, and thousands of other people. Daniel sighed. You're impossible. I learned from you. He couldn't help smiling. But then his expression became serious. Are you angry with me? Margaret looked at him for a long moment. No. Really? Really? Then why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to make one decision without having to convince anyone that it was reasonable. Daniel lowered his eyes. That sentence hurt. Because he knew exactly